Hey everybody, welcome back to the One Day at a Time Gambling Addiction Podcast. I'm your host Rob, and I made my last bet on November the 12th of 2022. Since then, I've made it my mission to help you to recover from your gambling addiction faster than I did. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Saul Malek, and I'm going to be passing it over to him to do a little bit of an introduction. So Saul, how are we doing today?
Hey, what's up, Rob? Doing well today. Thank you. As you mentioned, my name is Saul Malek. I'm here in Dallas, Texas, and my last bet was July 18th of 2019. So just hit the 4-year mark here. I was gambling throughout my undergraduate career at Trinity University. Spent a lot of time with the bookies, sports betting, and it brought a lot of harm into my life and the lives of people around me. And since that time, I've really been invested in speaking and doing outreach on this subject matter.
Yeah, well, firstly, congratulations on getting to that 4-year mark. That is awesome. I saw that you posted about it yesterday on your Instagram, which I will be linking below in the description for anyone that wants to follow Saul after this podcast. But moving forward into some questions, let's try to get maybe an understanding of what was going on with your gambling. How did it get started for you?
Yeah, so I'll jump right into the sports betting. Well, briefly, I'll say I was always interested in scratch off tickets. As a kid, I liked fantasy baseball. That was the main way that I kept close with my friends in middle school and high school. But it wasn't until college where I got introduced to sports betting, with a bookie through credit, and that happened because I had a buddy of mine reach out to me on Facebook Messenger. I mean, that's how you know this is kind of dated. This was back in 2017. So he reached out to me and said, "Hey, you've always helped me with fantasy sports. You're good at it. I found a bookie. Why don't you start betting sports with me?" And dude, it started so innocently. It was pretty much an afterthought. I almost didn't want to do it because I didn't want to potentially lose money on something that was uncertain. But I decided, hey, he's inviting me. He says I'm good at fantasy. He kind of boosted my ego a little bit. I said, what the heck? There was a baseball game that night, Blue Jays, Royals. I knew the Blue Jays pitcher was at the end of his career, wasn't doing well. And I said, I'll put in $10. That's a guarantee. And my bet was winning, 9-0 in like the second inning that night. And I felt like, bigger than I'd ever felt before, like on top of the world, even with this little measly $10 Venmo bet. Felt like the man, and I wanted to replicate that. And, people talk about how the early big wins, even the early wins, instill some sort of delusion in a gambler that becomes addicted. And I think that's really what happened to me.
No, absolutely. I think that the majority of the people that I've met through 12-step meetings, through doing this content, had some form of win right in the beginning, whether it was the first bet or the first few bets. It was some string of wins that convinced them that either they can get better at gambling or they're already good at gambling and they can make it a profession, and that whatever just happened can happen again. And I think that we see that a lot with casinos specifically is when someone wins, it's a huge deal. And everyone, there's like the flashing lights and everyone's running around. Even with sports, it's like, oh, this guy had this huge parlay hit, this huge bet hit. Like let's look at it, what happened, let's make a big deal about it, because they want you to think it could be you and that it can happen again, over and over and over again. Whereas the reality is, as we know, it doesn't end up going that way. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe kind of how things started to trend downwards over time?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, I mean, when it started, the sports betting back at the end of 2017, I was placing some bets with this bookie. He was someone who it was pretty much just an honor system. Like he knew my buddy, and so we arranged like a Venmo payment on whatever bet I had that night, and it would just be that bet that night, like one game every night, couple nights. But that only lasted for a short amount of time because I really enjoyed it so much, and I saw, hey, I'm winning. Why would I only want to bet one game, or why would I only want to bet $10? Because if I bet 10 games and $50, then there would be a lot more profit. So I ended up getting put onto these accounts online with like a bookie. I don't know if, man, kids might not even be doing this as much these days, but someone sets you up with an account, gives you a credit line, and you just kind of go from there and bet on your own schedule. Um,
Mm.
that's pretty much where I was. That's what I was doing, and I would say just within the first month or two, I was already placing bets on events that I was totally clueless about. I was betting on tennis matches, which actually for some reason became my favorite way to gamble. I was betting on basketball overseas, baseball overseas, all hours of the night, very early on. And, as I'm sure you can imagine, that led to more and more losing. It also led to more and more lying because I would be on my phone all the damn time. If I was out at dinner, I had the old maneuver, keep the phone on your lap and just kind of look up or pretend you're like, I don't know, staring at your crotch for, 30 minutes straight. I don't know how it's ever believable, but that's what I was doing. And, you know, I feel like I couldn't really see how bad it was. And it really got to a point where I just owed a lot of different people because eventually I stopped caring if I had the money to
Mm.
pay off whatever I was down, and I would find just a new bookie and say, it got dangerous, man. It got dangerous because I would start giving out my parents' address and personal info as a way for them to believe that I was good for the money just because I
Mm.
needed the action. So had a kid come to my parents' house and say hey, your son owes me like 2 grand, have him pay up. So it was situations like that. It
Mm.
gets a little hazy of what specific bookie at what specific time, but
Sure.
that was the gist of how it went, was that it's like, oh, now I have a whole stack of bookies I owe money to. And eventually too, it became where it wasn't just some college kid, it was, oh, some random guy from a sports bar in San Antonio who I actually owe money to, who I'm supposed to meet up with in person. And
Mm.
you have to take out loans, these really sketchy loans on these Native American websites where the interest rate is like 1,000% or something crazy. So
Mm.
it's weird because, and I'll stop rambling, but I'll just say it's weird because growing up, man, I never really thought that I would ever be in a financial struggle this early on in my life, just because blessed with parents that have always provided financially. And it's like, dude, why am I the guy taking out loans on a Native American website? That's crazy, but I was doing that at 20 years old.
Mm. No, I mean, we've had some previous conversations, but I'm glad that we're having this one because you touched on a few things that we haven't previously talked about. And it's this idea that with sports betting specifically, it's a progressive thing where in the beginning, you're betting on sports you care about, things that you think you know a lot about. Like, for your example, you knew a lot about this baseball game that you bet on. You knew the exact pitcher, you knew the lineups of each team. And in the end, you were betting on tennis that I'm going to guess happened somewhere in Kazakhstan or Bulgaria, and
Actually,
it was probably happening at like 3 in the morning, and it was probably ITF women's tennis. And the truth is that it happens to so many people. That's the kind of games that I was gambling on, and so many people who are addicted to sport tell you that tennis was the game that they liked. And no, it doesn't make sense to someone that's not involved in this addiction. But when you get that deep into what we got into, when you're looking for just anything to place money on, it turns out that the sport that has the most games, the sport that has the most bets per game, is tennis. There's always a tennis match. So it's not that we enjoy watching the minor league of tennis. It's that, it's available and it's what's available. So we go back to it. And I completely get that. And the same thing follows suit with your access to gambling. You gamble wherever you can because it's a sickness. It's a progressive sickness. And, you know, even though you might have been starting with someone that was your friend and you guys had a good relationship, the third bookie was a random guy that you met in a bar. It's just like it progresses to become less logical, more compulsive, just to continue the action.
well, I was just going to say, real quickly, I thought about how eventually, because I was messaging so many people from the same group chats that I didn't know,
Mm.
if word got around, so it became like an inside joke. And then these kids finally tried to convince me. They all ganged up together and tried to convince me to bet on the weather in Qatar. And they said, oh, you have to bet $5 every day. It's going to snow in
Mm.
Qatar. And eventually, when it finally hits, like after 5 years, it'll be such extreme odds you'll make it all back. And I was trying to do it, couldn't find it, wasn't an actual thing. So anyway,
Oh
that's
man.
insane it gets. But
Yeah, people don't get it. People don't get the severity. And of course, like seeing that those were the same people that were probably fielding the bet from you. I mean, of course, they're probably trying to just sell it to you. So at the same time, it was kind of a business thing, even if it was a joke on their end.
yeah, it's
But
true.
looking back, there is certain aspects to this that when you're in recovery, you can take a little solace in knowing how ridiculous it actually was. And when you're in the midst of it, it's the emotions are flying everywhere, and it's not a good life to be living. But now being 4 years out, I mean, looking back and saying that you were betting on snow in a place where the average temperature is a couple, like it is over 100 degrees, it's a learning experience. We'll call it that. But I know that you're from Texas, right? So there's no legalized sports gambling, and casinos are iffy. I think there's poker rooms. What was your kind of experience with any form of legal gambling in Texas? Have you ever wanted to, play poker or anything like that, or was it always just sports for you?
Yeah, I never really was interested in poker. There was a certain element of action with sports because I always loved sports. I wasn't ever someone that
Mm,
loved cards. I mean, I played poker nights with friends in high school where we'd go to someone's house, but even then, I was comfortable leaving at the end of the night. I mean, maybe I wanted to play a little more, but it wasn't this drive that I had to stay. I was fine getting up and going. I think
mm,
well, I guess trying to think of how to explain how I was gambling without confessing to, major crimes on the internet, but it was all through these like offshore accounts, and I was reassured by a few of these guys that what they were doing was legal because their company was based in Costa Rica. But I, never really was interested in these legal avenues, even when I turned of gambling age, like, 18, I believe, to make some of these accounts. And I even need to look at that to make sure now it's not 21, because by the time I stopped gambling, I was like halfway past my 21st birthday. So
mm,
I think with some of the casinos, in Louisiana where I could drive, I probably wouldn't have even been able to until the later stages of my gambling career. But there was a certain aspect that we talked about yesterday, I guess just off the recording, about the interactions with the bookie versus the interactions with the conglomerate, sports book that's owned by a bunch of investors.
mm,
And I really took a lot of pleasure of gambling with a bookie or some kid, some college kid, thinking that when I win, and I'm sure I would, when I win, it'll be so, joyous to have this guy pay me. It'll be awesome to make him have to go on his phone, send me the money, and tell all his buddies, this guy destroyed me. Or like tell his girlfriend, yeah, I can't take you out to dinner because this kid just cleaned me out for like 2 grand or something. Like I loved that idea.
mm. No, so I mean, when it comes to like the online casinos, obviously, if it wasn't legal, I would edit it out of this video. But the things that
Oh
you're
yeah.
talking about, they are actually legal. It's some very special exceptions that they have within their own governments that they're allowed to offer these games up, and it's why a lot of people are starting to gamble underage specifically. But we don't need to dive too deep into that. What going back to your point about your relationships to the bookies, it has this certain nature of competitiveness to it. I think that you want to be the winner. You want to come out as the big shot. And that's one of the main things that gambling addicts we seem to have in common is this idea that our gambling is our way of expressing that we won, that we are good, that we're getting better at something, and that we can beat someone else. And it's a very, very dangerous subject. There's this idea on the internet that, being a DGen is a good thing, that gambling is a way that you can form a community and it's a way to be accepted online. And this even goes into the idea that people that are just getting started with their gambling or haven't been around it that long, if they're winning in the beginning, they couldn't possibly justify wanting to quit because no one who's winning a lot of money would think, hey, maybe I should stop winning a lot of money. Because until you see the consequences, you don't really want to stop. What's your experience been with people who say that it's only a problem once you start to lose?
Yeah, I guess I'll even take it right from the 12 steps about gambling is not primarily a financial problem, it's an emotional problem. And I've experienced that myself because I take myself back to a time where I won one of these parlays. Everyone's obsessed with the parlay and crazy odds. I had a parlay that hit when I was out with some friends and the girl I was dating was at Trinity, and I remember even though I won that bet for a large amount of money, large to me at the time, it disrupted. the entire experience that a normal not adolescent, a normal college student should have of going out and being social. People that are in their 40s will talk about, oh, all these great memories they had when they were in school with their friends and their girlfriend. But for someone like me, the only memory I had of that night, and I brought it up to the girl later, was, oh, that was the night that I won this bet. And she was kind of dumbfounded. How could that be what you remembered from that night? We all went out and had a great time, and you were just preoccupied with gambling. That's really sad, and I think it
Mm,
is too. And it's especially crippling, at least for me, as the bets became more frequent. Of course, I wasn't winning them, but we are talking about gambling, so I'll put it into the hypothetical perspective of, if I were winning, if I had been winning, I can't imagine that I would have been happy, because the bets were being placed with such a frequency that there was no allowance for anything else. It's like someone
mm,
working an 80-hour work week or something, because pretty much at that point was my career. Although I wasn't earning an income, it was like the only career where I'm losing money. But that's what I would say. It wasn't about the finances, and there's so much more to it, about lying and hiding it and being preoccupied by thinking, being selfish, being
mm.
delusional. So I would say it wasn't just a problem of money, although certainly losing a lot of money wasn't great, wasn't ideal. I'm still paying back these debts even now. So that's kind of how it's going.
Yeah. So there's more to it than just the finances. The finances are kind of just like the telltale sign of how deep into gambling you are, but there's also all these things that are going on in the background that are costing you your time, your friendships, relationships, trust, all that kind of emotional baggage that comes along with gambling. And so, since you've stopped gambling, how has your life improved in that sense? Have those parts of your life gotten better?
I mean, yeah, I'd say that it's recovered pretty well. I try to be pretty active in working on my daily character. I'd say that I don't have that sense of hiding something when I go out in social settings or when I'm home, and that's been a big change for me, because really felt not even human going out in the social settings or talking to someone knowing that what I'm saying is going to be a lie, but being so possessed by this compulsion that I know I'm going to say a lie anyway. I don't, maybe there's a part of me that doesn't want to do it, but I know it's going to happen. And
Mm,
so that's been a real positive adjustment. And I just think it's really nice to do things that are so normal. Even now, I think sometimes when I'm eating dinner or getting Chipotle or something, hey, this is really a blessing to be able to kind of be in society and do normal things. And
mm,
I think that kind of goes into what we talked about together yesterday. Was now I mean, I guess I'll speak for me now. I stopped gambling. Well, what is there to do now? Because I don't think I'm going to be able to retire and have a family just off stopping gambling. There's got to be more to it than that. And I don't know,
mm.
I'm sure, I think you had said you'd found that to be true as well.
The first half is to give yourself the option to live a regular life. The second half is learning how to live that regular life now that you're not gambling. So once you get clean, which is a big battle, and you're staying clean, which is a continuing battle, then you have to think, all right, well, now I need to, find a way to make money that isn't gambling. I need to find something to do with my time. I need to reestablish friendships and relationships. Like, there's more towards growth that happens after the fact than just stopping. And that's something that people need to be aware of before they get into recovery. Because if you think that just stopping gambling is going to lead to you living a perfect life, that's just not true. But what it is going to do is it's going to give you the chance to live a better life. Because if you don't, there's no chance at all. And so that was an important topic. But also to that extent, people are kind of curious as to why I would even want to make content like this and to come out here and try to tell people that they can recover from a gambling addiction. And I know that you do something very similar. Do you want to talk about what you've been getting up to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So, I was on TikTok earlier, and I think in my haste to try to become acknowledged on that platform. I started just digging into my camera roll and posting like random videos of me like playing basketball and things. And so I thought that that was an unhealthy habit for me to try to chase this high of getting noticed, and it wasn't even working. So I deleted it, but I am, open to getting back into it if I had the right motives and the content I was posting was back to good content. So that's a little aside, but my main focus has been on getting to speak to schools or youth groups or colleges, fraternities, because these are the places that need to hear it. And at the moment, I'm not sure that enough places recognize the need for it. I mean, it is a pretty niche topic because you could bring someone in to speak about just mental health as a blanket term or just addiction in general. When you get into gambling specifically, you're kind of hitting a little bit of a niche subject, although, there are so many things that go into it with emotion and
Mm.
self-esteem. But that's been my goal. My goal is to become a legitimate, I don't know about authority, but a legitimate person that's trusted to educate schools or young people especially.
No, I love that. And one thing that I wanted to ask you when we talked about this before was, being on TikTok, I know that a good amount of the people that the content reaches either aren't ready to hear what I have to say or have no interest in what I have to say. So
Hmm.
when you go and you speak to a high school group, are you going in with that same intention? Like, what are you expecting to be the reaction to what you say, kind of thing?
I'm glad you addressed that because actually the first time I spoke, which was back at my high school in Houston where I went back to give a little talk to them. I heard some kids in one of the front aisles when I was waiting to get on the stage, one of them or a couple of them laughing with each other saying, "This is what happens when you gamble. This is going to be what happens when you gamble," and like making
Hmm.
up stuff and laughing. And then, they had to have a school counselor go and get them to be quiet. But that did kind of throw me off because I think I'm a lot more realistic now. I think my first mindset was almost delusional of, oh, they're all going to love me, it's all going to be great, I'm going to go up there and deliver this awesome talk, it's going to save a million kids. I mean, that's just not how it goes. That's not how it goes at all. I think that a lot of the kids will leave there making fun of it, and that's not to say it's not still valuable, because what happens 3 years down the road when they think no one gets me, no one understands what I'm going through? Oh wait, there was that guy, who talked to us 3 years ago in high school. Maybe I should go search him up and send him an email and see, if we could have a
Hmm.
chat. And I think that's a large part of the value of it, is maybe not the direct in the moment impact, but the fact that it's there for someone and it'll sit with them as, gambling might get legalized here in Texas, or they just run into a problem later on. So yeah, I think I'm more realistic in thinking that it won't apply to everyone. Well, some people won't get it, but I think that there's enough there that it will be worth it for schools to have that sort of message.
Yeah, I actually really love that, and that's kind of the same mindset I take into creating videos, is because I think a lot of the people that will get benefit out of it are not the ones that like it or leave a comment. They're the ones that watch it, forget about it for a while, and it's still there. It's not gone. You can always come back to it, and I think that's the power in putting your word out there and getting into people's minds in a positive way. So I really appreciate you going into that because I think it's an important topic. Um, Seeing that there's, just a few minutes left in our time here for the podcast, I just wanted to kind of ask you, something I hadn't asked you before. If you could go back in time and have a conversation with yourself before you made that first bet, what would it be? And I mean, a lot of people would probably say, hey, don't gamble. But maybe like what else could you say in that situation?
Wow, that's a really really good question. I'm trying to think what the realistic answer is, because I can say realistically, if I were to have gone back and told myself whatever I needed to hear, it would have fallen on deaf ears with the way I was
Mm,
kind of built back then. I don't think that I would have heeded that sort of warning. But let's say in an ideal world, if I had an open line of communication with myself, I think the understanding that I would want to get across to me is not even really about placing bets. It's sort of I think what I would want to say is, the real world is not the way it was growing up in, a nice suburb of Houston where parents will take care of everything for you. I think it would be a message of awareness to the reality of life and how things are not always fair. They're not always easy. They're not always ideal. And coping with that is a discipline, and escaping, whether it is gambling or drinking or drugs or anything, is not going to be sustainable, and will just create more problems. So I think it would be kind of a wake up message of what the
Hmm.
world really looks like.
I actually really like that because I ask that question a lot on the podcast episodes that I do, and a lot of people will say something like, know yourself or avoid this, know when it's a problem. But you're saying like, hey, if I went back in time, I probably would have told myself to screw off because it's just how I was. And, I think that's actually probably what would have happened if I did the same, if I was being honest with myself. So,
Yeah.
in the same mindset, though, it's like just how you're talking to the high school kids. It's like maybe you going back and saying that to yourself would have gotten you to the solution a little bit faster. Maybe it wouldn't have been then, but maybe before it dived so deep into things. So, Saul, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate you taking the time to, spread your word, talk about your experience with gambling and the harm it's brought into your life. I'm wishing you the absolute best in all of your journeys going forward, and especially with talking to kids about gambling addiction. And I'm going to be linking Saul's socials down in the description below. If you're interested in what he does, I'm also going to be linking his website. Go and check that out. It's a really good website. Put a lot of time and effort into it, so don't let it fall on deaf ears, as we said earlier in the recording. So thank you, Saul, for being on. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
So to the audience, thank you for watching, and let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.